Thank you. You'll notice that he didn't say singer. And since everyone else was doing something and there was no way Josh was going to let me sing today, I thought I'd take a crack at this. Not long ago, the two former presidents, Bush, were in an airport together when the younger one said to his father, "Hey, Dad, look at that old man with the long robe and the flowing beard. I think it's Moses. I'm going to go over and say hi." The father says, "Don't bother. He's not going to talk to you." He says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I tried it once." He said to me, "Get away. The last time I talked to a bush, I was in the desert for 40 years. So talented.
It's a full-service rabbit that we provide here.
In this week's Torah portion, Hukkat, we find ourselves coming to the end of that 40-year journey from Egypt, a momentous historical milestone. And the portion also addresses the transition from one generation to the next. I want to look at a particular episode in this week's portion because I think one episode tells us a lot about the Jewish view of leadership, and one that I think has a lot of lessons for us today. It's clear that Moses is among the greatest leaders of the Jewish people and one of the individuals who gets more ink than anyone else in the Bible. Nonetheless, as Rabbi Eliana Hukkat recently pointed out, there's only one time that the Torah expressly mentions any of his personal characteristics. In Parsha Ha'alachot, we read, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od makol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adamah." Moses was a very humble man, more so than any other man on earth. Rabbi Moshe Rothblum recently explained from this bima that the concept of humility is not about having a weak sense of oneself, but about the proper balance between self-confidence and the recognition that no matter who we are, there are forces in the world greater than us, even if you're leading the people out of slavery to the promised land. Such humility, Rabbi Rothblum explained, is both the most difficult personal characteristic and also the most important. And perhaps that's why it's the only one of Moses's that is expressly mentioned. But Moses's actions this week tell us a great deal about his character and, by extension, Judaism's view of leadership. Let me set the scene at chapter 20. The people have been wandering in the wilderness for almost 40 years and find themselves in the wilderness of Kadesh, which is apparently not the desert paradise some of them had hoped to find. They're complaining. I know, you're shocked. "Why did you bring us to this place? We should have stayed in Egypt. We're just going to die in this wilderness." And of course, they complain about the food. There's nothing to eat. There's nothing to drink. It's terrible here. Moses takes all this in stride and appears before God, who says, "Here's my plan. You and Aaron take that stick that you've been carrying around all these years and assemble the community. And when you have everyone's attention, speak to the rock and tell it to give water. And if you do that, you'll have plenty of the water for the people to drink and with which to feed their animals." So Moses takes his staff, assembles all the people, but when he has them, he says, "Listen up, you rebels. Shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And with that, he doesn't speak to the rock, but he takes the staff and he strikes the rock not once but twice. And out comes all the water the people could ever want. But the story doesn't end there. And in fact, God is not very happy with Moses. In fact, God says to Moses, "Because you did not trust me, you shall not lead the people into the land that I have given them." I believe that this episode and its aftermath suggests at least 4 characteristics of a leader. First, it reinforces the notion that humility is a critical characteristic. Some commentators argue that the reason God condemned Moses to die in the wilderness was not because he hit the rock, but because in so doing, he said to the people, "Shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And therefore, taking credit for God's miracle. He's exaggerating his own self-worth in relation to God's power. The balance between his own self-confidence and God's power is out of kilter. He's not being humble, and for this reason, he is punished. Second, the episode tells us that our leaders must be patient, slow to anger, and listen to those who they lead. Now, it's easy to sympathize with Moses here. Imagine you've helped lead the people out of slavery, paved the way for God's commandments, walked them through a parted sea, and all they do is complain about the food. I'm picturing Woody Allen saying the pomegranates are terrible and there's not enough of them. Regardless, Moses is exasperated with these people. He calls them rebel. He strikes the rock with his stick, not once but twice. He simply lost his temper. Maimonides thinks that this is the reason that Moses is punished. He explains that God punished Moses because Moses, quote, erred on the side of anger and deviated from the mean of patience. Although such frustration is understandable, it's not worthy of someone of Moses' stature. Although it is a lot to ask, we need our leaders to listen to what the people are saying and be patient and understanding, even if that understanding may not be deserved. Third, I think these events teach us that a leader must act in an ethically and morally proper manner. In other words, how we do things is just as important as what we do. This episode might have had what one could call a happy ending. After all, the dilemma is resolved. The people need water, the people get their water. But in fact, it didn't. It was not enough that the people got their water. It was also crucial how they got it. God punishes Moses because of the manner in which he acted, even if the end was positive. The lesson is that the ends do not always justify the means. Finally, I was struck most by what the story tells us about selflessness, commitment, and perseverance. Think about this. You're Moses. You've had an unbelievable career. You've led these people for 2 generations. You marched them through the desert, through good and bad, putting up with all their complaining whenever it gets a little too hot or the water's not just right. And every time God says jump, your response is how high. Now, after 40 years, you lose your temper once, hit the rock, and God comes down and says, you're not going to be allowed into the promised land. I don't know about any of you, but I'm done. I take my stick, I go home, I'm retired. Not Moses. Moses doesn't miss a beat. He picks up right where he left off. He dispatches messengers to the kingdom of the king of Edom. When that doesn't work, he takes the people to Mount Hor. Even after his brother Aaron dies, he continues to lead the people and to intercede with God on their behalf. This is after God has said, you are not getting in. No way, no how. He doesn't give up. He continues to lead the people. That's a mensch. We find ourselves at a historical point similar to the one confronting the people in Parsha Hukkat. There, the people had survived being enslaved in Egypt, but their freedom brought new and different challenges. And the generation that had taken them from Egypt, led by Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, was no more. New leaders were needed to confront new challenges. Likewise, we sit here today, having survived the Nazi effort to wipe the Jews from the face of the earth, and other totalitarian efforts to destroy our way of life. As American Jews, we are privileged to live in perhaps the most inviting and welcoming society our people has ever known. And as Zionists, we can take pride in having helped create a tiny country that is truly extraordinary in so many ways. For all of this, we are truly indebted to the leaders who brought us to this place. But now that we are here, we face largely unprecedented economic, political, environmental, and social issues. If we are to honor those who led us here and not squander their accomplishments, we will need to rise to these challenges. May we be blessed with leaders who are humble, patient, ethical, and selfless. Shabbat Shalom.